For 5 days, the golden retriever stood motionless beside the storm drain. He didn't bark, didn't move, just stared into the darkness as if something sacred was trapped below. Most people walked past him, dismissing him as a stray, but on the 6th day someone finally stopped, and what they discovered inside that drain left the entire town speechless. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Crescent Hollow was a sleepy town nestled between foggy hills and the wide wind-ruffled waters of Mirror Lake. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone's dog favorite pie flavor and childhood secrets. As October rolled in, the weather began its yearly transformation. Crisp air with a biting breeze that hinted of early frost, auburn leaves scattered across sidewalks and sunsets that came too soon, casting the streets in long, melancholic shadows by 5 p.m. Claire Thompson pulled her coat tighter around her slender frame as she stepped out of Blossom and Fern, the small flower shop she'd managed since her mother passed away last spring. Claire was 28, of medium height, with wavy chestnut hair that she often kept in a loose braid. Her face, once expressive and full of laughter, now carried a certain stillness, as if every smile required negotiation with the sadness behind her hazel eyes. Since her mother's passing from pancreatic cancer, Claire had become quieter, more introspective, avoiding gatherings, and instead pouring herself into hydrangea arrangements and peonies in a vase. She turned onto Maple Street, her boots crunching over dry leaves. That's when she saw him again, just as she had the past 3 afternoons. The dog. He stood motionless beside the old storm drain outside Marlin's Secondhand Treasures, a thrift store closed down since August. The late sunlight fell across his golden fur, giving it an almost ethereal glow, like melted sunlight woven into movement. The dog was a golden retriever, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, with a thick coat dulled in places from dust, but still unmistakably beautiful. His ears drooped slightly and his nose, dotted with a small scar, twitched faintly at the air. But it was his eyes that rooted Claire in place, wide amber, and filled with a sadness so human it made her throat tighten. Every time she tried to get closer, he barked. Not out of aggression, no raised fur, no baring of teeth, but more like a warning, a desperate plea to stay back. And so, like before, Claire only watched. The dog stood with one paw slightly raised, peering down into the grate. She followed his gaze, but the metal bars revealed only shadow and silence. On this particular evening, a breeze tugged at the ends of her scarf as she lingered. Claire shifted the paper-wrapped bouquet in her arms, a leftover order that hadn't been picked up, and tilted her head. Something about the dog's unwavering stance, the way he hadn't moved in days, made her stomach twist. She whispered to herself, "Who are you waiting for, boy?" He flicked an ear, but didn't turn. She walked on, hugging her coat. Across the street and a few doors down, behind a lace-curtained window on the 2nd floor of a narrow green house, a boy peered through a pair of plastic binoculars. Josh Wallace, 9 years old, had made this his secret mission for the past 5 afternoons: observe the mystery dog. He was small for his age, with curly red hair that refused to be tamed, and a scattering of freckles across his nose like constellations. He was wiry, quick-footed, and had a stubborn bravery that made him a regular climber of fences and trees, even though his grandmother told him not to. Josh lived with his grandmother, Mrs. Edith Wallace, a woman in her late 70s, whose mind had started to wander in recent years. She often forgot whether she'd already taken her pills or if Josh had eaten lunch. She sometimes called him Harold, the name of her late husband. Still, Josh loved her fiercely. He took care of the plants, did the grocery runs, and read to her at night from the same worn-out mystery novel. Josh loved animals, especially dogs. He had tried feeding the golden retriever 2 days ago. He had sneaked out with a slice of ham wrapped in a napkin and placed it near the curb while pretending to tie his shoelace. But the dog hadn't even sniffed it. Just looked down into the drain unmoved. Josh had sighed and gone back inside, but that evening he began writing a dog log in a spiral notebook. Entry Thermra 1. Dog stares into hole, doesn't like ham, eyes like movies. Today's entry would be longer. Back on the street, Claire glanced once more over her shoulder as she reached the end of the block. The dog was still there, motionless, loyal to whatever secret the drain held. That night, Josh read his newest log entry to his grandmother, who listened silently, half asleep. He drew a little cartoon of the dog with a flashlight peering down a hole. Then he went to his window and looked out into the darkness, half hoping the dog had gone home, half hoping he hadn't. But of course he was still there, just standing, waiting, guarding. Claire, meanwhile, sat on the floor of her quiet apartment above the flower shop, the bouquet still on the table untouched. She thought of the dog's eyes again, how familiar that grief was. She leaned her head against the window pane and whispered, "Why won't you let me help you?" Outside, the wind picked up. The stars appeared one by one. And Milo, though she didn't know his name yet, didn't move from his post. Claire had always believed that healing came in small gestures, an orchid blooming late, a forgotten thank-you note found in an apron pocket, or the subtle fragrance of lilies on a morning breeze. But nothing in her gentle worldview prepared her for what she witnessed that chilly Tuesday afternoon on Maple Street. It had been 5 days since she first saw the golden retriever beside the storm drain. That morning, after placing a bouquet of chrysanthemums in the shop window, Claire wrapped herself in a navy wool coat and walked purposefully to the bakery across from her flower shop. The scent of warm cinnamon and fresh sourdough greeted her as she stepped inside. Behind the counter stood Doris Bell, the bakery's owner, and Crescent Hollow's undisputed queen of cookies. Doris was in her early 60s with tightly curled gray hair, kind brown eyes framed by thick spectacles, and the robust stature of someone who lifted flour sacks like they were pillows. She was cheerful, warm-hearted, and had a memory like an elephant one that didn't forget who liked double-glazed and who pretended they didn't. "Claire, darling," Doris said with a smile, wiping flour from her hands. "Your usual?" "Not today," Claire said, hesitant. "Do you happen to have any dog treats?" "Meaty ones," Doris blinked, surprised. "Since when do you have a dog?" "I don't," Claire replied, fiddling with her sleeves. "But there's one outside Marlin's that won't stop standing by the drain. I want to try feeding him." Doris tilted her head, then nodded knowingly. "That golden retriever, I've seen him. Sweet eyes like he's waiting for something or someone." She disappeared behind the counter and returned with a brown paper bag. Leftover beef jerky scraps. "Still good. Try these." Claire thanked her and made her way across the street, heart beating a little faster with every step. Milo was there just as always, perfectly still, except for the flicker of his fur in the wind. The clouds overhead churned with pale gray, casting a soft, dull light over the street. She crouched down slowly, keeping her distance, and pulled a piece of the treat from the bag. She set it on the pavement about 2 feet away from him, murmuring gently, "Here you go, boy. It's all right." Milo didn't move at first. Then, cautiously, he stepped forward and took the treat in his mouth. Claire watched with a small smile forming on her face until he turned, walked back to the drain, and gently slid the piece through the metal grate. She blinked. Had he just fed the storm drain? She placed another piece, and the same thing happened. Milo wouldn't eat them. He simply pushed them one by one into the darkness below, each slipping away soundlessly. Claire's smile vanished, replaced with wide-eyed confusion. She stood up, took a slow step forward. "Milo," she said, though she didn't know his name. The word came naturally. He stiffened. His head-shot-up eyes locked on hers with sudden intensity. Then came the bark, loud, sharp, desperate. Claire stumbled back instinctively, her heart hammering. She wasn't scared of dogs, but there was something urgent in that bark, a kind of warning she didn't understand. She held up both hands and backed away, her breath clouding in the cold air. Across the street, behind his window, Josh Wallace had seen the entire thing. Josh was kneeling on a stack of old phone books to reach the windowsill. In his hands, a clunky second-hand smartphone. His grandmother's old model shook slightly as he filmed through a narrow gap in the curtain. He'd been watching the golden retriever for days now, fascinated. But today was different. He had never seen a dog act like that. Dogs ate treats. They didn't feed storm drains. "Dog feeds whole," he whispered, then quickly added, "No feeds someone in whole." He tapped his phone, opened the camera roll, and played the video back. It was shaky but clear enough. A golden retriever gently placing food into a drain. That was something. That was weird. That was internet-worthy. Josh didn't have any social media accounts of his own, but he'd seen his friend Micah use a site called Clip Critter. With a few careful clicks and his grandmother's Wi-Fi password, he uploaded the video and titled it, "Dog Feeds the Drain. Who's Down There?" He even added a caption, "Might be a monster, might be another dog, might be aliens." Within a few hours, the clip had a dozen views. By nightfall, it had over 100. Claire, meanwhile, sat in her apartment staring at the crumpled bag of treats. She felt something unsettled stirring beneath her ribs. Milo hadn't wanted the food. He'd wanted to share it with whatever was beneath that drain. Was it another animal? A trapped pet? Something worse. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Her mother's voice came to her suddenly, soft and vivid. "When something doesn't make sense, Claire. Bear, it's because there's something you haven't seen yet. So look again." The next day, she bought more treats. The next few days in Crescent Hollow passed beneath a sky the color of wet ash. The crispness of early autumn had surrendered to a cold drizzle that settled deep into the bones. Mornings began with mist curling like pale fingers over the lake, and nights ended in winds that whispered secrets through shutter cracks. But even in the biting air, the golden dog remained always by the drain. Claire Thompson had fallen into a quiet rhythm. After closing the shop each afternoon, she would walk across the street with a small brown bag of treats and kneel a respectful distance away from the storm grate. She never rushed, never pushed. Instead, she simply sat, coat tucked around her legs, and talked softly about her day, about the customers who came in, asking for sympathy bouquets or apology arrangements. She talked about her mother. It had been 7 months since her mother passed. 7 long months of silent dinners and unreturned phone calls, of setting 2 mugs of tea and only drinking 1. Her mother, Meredith Thompson, had been a vibrant woman with silver-streaked auburn hair, a crooked smile, and a laugh that turned heads. She'd also been fiercely practical, raising Claire alone after Claire's father left, running the flower shop with a florist's intuition and a businesswoman's resolve. But her heart, Claire always believed, had belonged most to their golden retriever, Comfort. Comfort had been Meredith's companion during chemo, her protector on the hardest nights, her warmth when the pain had grown unbearable. When Comfort passed away a week before her mother's final hospital admission, something inside Meredith seemed to give up. Claire had buried both within 3 weeks of each other. Since then, she hadn't let herself look too long at any golden retriever until Milo. The change in Milo was slow. The first time she sat beside him in silence for more than 5 minutes, he didn't bark. The second day, he sniffed the treat before nudging it toward the grate. On the third, she noticed something startling when she arrived. His tail gave a hesitant wag. That Wednesday, the rain began before noon and didn't let up. The gutters gurgled, and the glass storefronts fogged with condensation. Claire pulled a hood over her head and crossed the street with her umbrella held high above her shoulder. She found Milo curled tight beside the grate damp, but unmoving, his chin resting on his paws. She sat next to him close enough to feel the warmth of his body, far enough not to intrude. "I miss her too," she whispered. The rain whispered around them, tapping gently on the umbrella's canopy. Then, beneath the constant patter, she heard it. A faint, high-pitched mewling. Weak, reedy. Almost lost beneath the water's murmur. Claire's breath caught. She leaned closer, squinting into the grate, but it was too dark to see anything. She heard it again, closer this time. A kitten. Her mind raced. Was that what Milo had been feeding all along, across town in a cluttered office above the Crescent Hollow Herald building? Caleb Morgan leaned back in his creaking desk chair and rubbed his eyes. Caleb was 32, with sandy brown hair always one day past needing a trim, and a slightly crooked nose that gave his face an endearing asymmetry. He dressed like a college professor who'd lost his way to campus corduroy blazers, with elbow patches, scuffed boots, and reading glasses perched permanently atop his head. His nature was curious to a fault, always poking at small-town stories until something meaningful fell out. He had stumbled across the video by accident, a clip shared on a Reddit thread titled "Animals Smarter Than Us." A golden retriever feeding a storm drain. It was odd. Then he'd clicked on the uploader's name, J. Wallace 9. With a few calls and a favor from a librarian friend, he found the Wallace residence. When he knocked, the door was answered by a boy with tangled red curls and bright, wary eyes. "You're not here to take him away, are you?" Josh asked. "Who?" Caleb blinked. "The dog, Milo." Caleb smiled. "No, I'm just here to understand why a dog might feed something in a drain. And I hear you're the expert." Josh grinned. They sat in the living room surrounded by teacups and doilies. Edith Wallace, Josh's grandmother, was kind, but quiet, nodding absently and calling Caleb Harold twice. Caleb asked gentle questions what Josh had seen, how long the dog had been there, whether anyone else had noticed. Josh pulled out his dog log, now filled with drawings, observations, and even a cutout of the bakery flyer where Milo had first been spotted. Then, from behind the couch, Josh retrieved something Caleb didn't expect to photograph. It was a printout of a screenshot from the video, a blurry still of Claire kneeling beside Milo, both their heads tilted toward the drain. The photo wasn't sharp, but the emotion in it was palpable. Caleb stared at it for a long moment. "Do you know who she is?" he asked. Josh nodded. "Claire. She owns the flower shop. I think she's sad." Caleb tapped his notepad. Sad people and sad dogs tend to find each other. Later that evening, Caleb passed by the flower shop. Through the window, he saw Claire bent over a tray of marigolds, her face shadowed by lamplight. He didn't knock. Not yet. Across the street, Milo lay once more beside the drain tail, curled around his body. Claire had brought a flashlight this time, but still couldn't see anything. The mewling had stopped. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, she would do more. The next morning brought sunlight soft and unfamiliar after days of gray. It filtered through the trees along Maple Street like hope after morning, streaking warm light across wet pavement. Claire stood outside Marlin's second-hand treasure's heart, pounding as she pressed her phone to her ear. Milo, sitting beside her as always, let out a low, anxious whine and looked toward the storm grate. "Yes, hello. Yes, it's urgent," Claire was saying to the operator. "I believe there are animals trapped in the storm drain. I heard them. A kitten or more than one, maybe. Please, I need someone to come look." Milo gave a soft bark and pawed at the grate. His golden coat shimmered slightly under the morning sun, and Claire reached out to rest her fingers lightly on his head. He didn't flinch. 15 minutes later, a red fire truck rumbled down the street. The sound echoed off the brick storefronts, turning heads and drawing a few curious onlookers. Leading the response was Fire Captain Brenda Ellis, a woman in her late 40s with short silver-blonde hair, a squared jaw, and the confident stride of someone who had walked into more danger than she cared to admit. Brenda was known around Crescent Hollow as practical no-nonsense and fiercely protective of anything small children, animals, even baby turtles once during a flood. "Miss Thompson," Brenda asked as she approached. Her blue uniform was crisp and her boots clunked solidly against the sidewalk. "That's me," Claire said, stepping forward. "The dog, he's been here for days. He's been dropping food into the grate. And yesterday, I heard meowing." Brenda raised a brow and knelt near the drain. She listened for a long moment, then motioned toward her crew. "Let's open it up." 2 firefighters approached with crowbars and gloves. Claire watched nerves buzzing in her stomach. Milo stood a few feet away, tail low, ears forward, his entire body alert. The metal grate lifted with a harsh screech, revealing the dark tunnel below. One of the younger firefighters, a lanky man named Luis with warm brown skin and a crooked grin, peered inside with a flashlight. "Captain," he called. "She's right." Claire stepped closer. She, Luis, turned, grinning. "Yeah, there's more than one." With a rope tied around his waist, he descended carefully into the narrow opening. The seconds stretched painfully. Then movement. One by one, he handed them up, tiny soaked kittens, their fur matted and their bodies trembling. The first was orange and white, the next entirely gray, then black. Then 2 more, both a smoky charcoal. 5 in all, none older than 4 weeks. Claire gasped softly as she wrapped a towel one she'd grabbed hastily from the flower shop around the smallest one. Milo barked once, a joyful, almost celebratory sound, and trotted in circles around the group. His tail wagged with a kind of pride, and he bounced gently toward Claire, licking at her hands. He knew she whispered. All this time, he was protecting them. Brenda nodded, giving the golden retriever an approving look. Smart boy. Wouldn't be surprised if he saved their lives. The crowd around them had grown, a few passers-by, including Mrs. Dalton from the post office, and a teenager on a skateboard who'd started filming the rescue. The kittens mewed softly in their blankets as the fire crew gently prepped them for transport. Milo lay down beside them, his head resting close to the smallest kitten. Claire watched him for a long moment, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a simple blue collar. It had belonged to Comfort. She didn't know why she had kept it in her bag that day. Maybe now she did. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Caleb Morgan was typing furiously in his upstairs office above the Crescent Hollow Herald. Sunlight streamed across his cluttered desk. Beside his laptop was a printout of the viral video Josh had uploaded, and next to that his notepad scribbled with lines like "moral compass of animals, grief, mirroring loyalty, and can empathy exist in instinct?" He leaned back, ran a hand through his hair, and muttered, "This isn't a local curiosity anymore. This is a damn parable." Caleb's piece, titled "The Dog, the Drain, and the 5 Forgotten Lives," was published online that afternoon. It opened with a photo of Milo lying beside the kittens, and within hours the article was shared hundreds of times on social media. Comments flooded in, people praising Milo's compassion, Claire's courage, and even Josh's curiosity for bringing the story to light. That night, Blossom and Fern saw more visitors than it had in months. People came to meet the flower shop girl with the rescue dog. A teacher ordered a classroom bouquet. A retired couple requested a thank you arrangement for the fire department. Claire found herself smiling more than she had in weeks, the grief momentarily lightened by new warmth. Josh, on the other hand, received a letter from his school principal. It wasn't a reprimand as he feared, but a commendation. The next morning in assembly, he was brought onto the stage, a little embarrassed, cheeks glowing red. The principal praised his curiosity, kindness, and initiative. He was even given a Young Citizen's Medal, which he wore the rest of the day like a badge of honor. When Claire returned home that evening, she opened the door to find Milo waiting at the foot of her couch. He thumped his tail once, then twice. The collar was still in her pocket. She knelt beside him and whispered, "Welcome home." By the time the leaves had turned fully to fire-burnt orange-crimson ochre, Crescent Hollow was alive with celebration. The town's annual Autumn Harvest Festival, usually a quiet affair with pumpkin carving contests and apple pie cook-offs, had taken on a new tone that year. Children wore golden dog ears instead of witch hats, and in the center of Maple Square stood a blown-up photograph on a wooden easel, a golden retriever with intelligent eyes lying beside a row of rescued kittens. The caption read simply, "Milo, the Heart of Hollow." Claire Thompson stood just behind the photograph, hand resting gently on the thick ruff of Milo's neck. He sat beside her, calm as Evertail, wagging lazily with each breeze. His coat had grown glossier over the past weeks, a result of regular grooming, nutritious meals, and loved the kind of healing that only presence and patience could bring. After the rescue, Claire had taken Milo home that same evening. She'd clipped Comfort's old collar around his neck and whispered the name aloud, unsure at first whether it was hers to give. But Milo had looked up at her ears, perked, and let out a soft chuff of acknowledgement. The name, made famous by Caleb's article, had simply felt right. And so, Milo became her dog, officially, legally, and in every quiet moment of her days. At the Crescent Hollow Animal Rescue Center, the 5 kittens, now healthy and curious, had been taken in by a woman named Linda Markham, a volunteer foster carer with gentle eyes and an unhurried way of speaking. Linda, a retired librarian in her 60s, had a tidy gray bun and a habit of humming jazz standards under her breath while changing litter trays. She described the kittens as chaotic angels, and over the next month she placed them in loving homes one by one. The last to leave was the smallest one, the orange and white runt who had been nestled deepest in the drain. He went to live with an elderly widower named Bert, who wore suspenders and played harmonica to help with his arthritis. Claire had visited Linda once, bringing a bouquet of marigolds and a tin of shortbread. "You gave those little ones a chance to grow," Linda had told her. "That's no small thing." But the heart of the town's collective attention was now focused on the festival and on Josh Wallace. The stage in Maple Square was modest, a platform of repurposed barnwood with harvest garlands strung along the edges. Josh stood at the center in a blue hoodie, his cheeks flushed with nervousness, one hand clutching a crinkled sheet of paper. Claire and Milo were seated to one side with Caleb Morgan standing in the crowd below, camera slung around his neck ready to capture the moment. Josh cleared his throat, glanced toward his grandmother in the front row, Mrs. Edith Wallace, smiling with a handkerchief bunched in her palm, and began reading. "I saw Milo before most people did," Josh said, voice shaking a little. "He stood by the drain every day, and I didn't understand why. At first, I just thought he was sad or waiting for someone who'd never come. But I kept watching. I wrote everything down. I made drawings. I started asking why. And then I took a video. That video, well, you all know what happened." The crowd chuckled softly. Josh looked over at Milo, who was lying down, eyes half-lidded in the sun. Milo didn't bark to scare people away. He barked because he was protecting something. He didn't eat the treats people gave him, he gave them to the kittens below. He cared about something even though he didn't know if anyone else would. That's bravery. That's love. There was a brief silence, broken only by a quiet sniffle from someone in the back. Josh smiled. He reminds us that being kind matters even when no one's looking. As the applause rose, Claire wiped at the corner of her eye. and reached down to scratch Milo behind the ears. Caleb snapped a photo at that exact moment, the sun behind them, Milo framed between Claire and the edge of the stage, a moment caught between shadow and gold. Weeks later, Caleb's article appeared in the Heartland Journal, a nationally syndicated magazine that specialized in human interest stories. His editor had fought to get it on the cover. The photo, Milo and the kittens with Claire's hand just barely visible in the corner, sat beneath the headline, "What a Dog Saw," and what a town remembered. In the story, Caleb described how grief could isolate a heart, how kindness could bridge that isolation, and how a golden retriever in guarding something so small and vulnerable had unwittingly healed an entire community's forgotten parts. He told of Claire's quiet resilience, Josh's childlike faith, and the way a single act of compassion had unraveled into hundreds more. The response was overwhelming. Letters poured into the town hall, into the flower shop, even into the rescue center. People sent treats, postcards, hand-drawn sketches of Milo. A local artist painted a mural on the side of the bakery, showing Milo with the kittens curled against him, eyes full of purpose. But for Claire, the most profound change wasn't in the town or the shop's sudden popularity. It was at night, when she and Milo curled up together on the couch, a soft blanket over their legs, the hum of the radiator like a distant lullaby. The house no longer echoed. The silence no longer ached. One evening she found herself humming again while pruning roses. Just a few notes. But it was a beginning. And Milo, lying in the hallway nearby, lifted his head and wagged his tail. Sometimes the smallest acts of love carry the greatest weight. Milo didn't have words, but his actions spoke a truth deeper than any sermon. Compassion doesn't require recognition, it requires heart. In a world often filled with noise, fear, and distractions, this golden retriever reminded us of something divine, that even when no one is watching, God sees. Perhaps Milo was more than just a dog. Perhaps he was a quiet miracle sent to restore a broken heart, guide a grieving soul, and remind a town that kindness is never wasted. Maybe, just maybe God works through unlikely messengers with paws, with fur, and with eyes that reflect a love we sometimes forget we're worthy of. If you believe that miracles still walk among us, sometimes on four legs, leave a comment below and say, Amen. Share this story to inspire someone today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope, healing, and heart. May God bless you and your loved ones today and always.